Hello, my name is Soleil Kim, and I'm the president of the Miramar National Cemetery Support Foundation and a U.S. Army retiree. On behalf of the Miramar National Cemetery Support Foundation, we welcome you to our Veterans Day ceremony, wishing a happy Veterans Day to each of you, a day of remembrance set aside to honor American veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the greater good. This Veterans Day, we continue to honor the heroism of all of our active duty service members and veterans. Words can never truly express the gratitude we have for their every effort. This is the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. We would like to take an opportunity to honor veterans in service that day, the men and women who joined the service in response to that day, along with all of our first responders who were in service on September 11, 2001. There are so many acts of heroism, each leading to a sense of our nation's resilience, that we would find a way to persevere. From the loss of that day grew a sense of pride in our country coming together in unity with its response. From those days came 2 decades worth of heroes. To the brave firefighters who climbed the steps at the World Trade Center to save others, never to see their loved ones again. To the group of strangers, passengers on United Flight 93, who learned of what occurred in New York City and made it their last heroic act in life to stop terrorists from reaching their intended target, preventing the plane from killing untold numbers of people in the U.S. Capitol. To the swift action of on-site military and civilian personnel risking their own lives to save those injured and still in danger after the strike at the Pentagon. We showed extreme bravery and courage that day. To all the search and rescue personnel working nonstop in the days, months, and years after, helping to bring closure to those who lost their loved ones. To all the young men and women who signed up to serve their country in the days immediately following. To the approximately 3 million service members who deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Freedom Sentinel, known as America's Global War on Terrorism, ongoing through this past August. We showed grit and determination. Today, we'll hear from Director of Fort Rosecrans and Miramar National Cemetery, the final resting places for many of our veterans lost to war, along with 2 gentlemen who live here in San Diego and who are at the heart of 9/11, at the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon in Northern Virginia. It's a pleasure to be in their company today, to hear their accounts firsthand. Today I have the pleasure of introducing the Director of Fort Rosecrans and Miramar National Cemeteries, Ms. Greta Hamilton, who assumed her duties in March of this year. Upon taking the position, Greta immediately began supervising a massive construction project at the cemetery that will expand interment capacity while adding new roadways and other facilities. This project is well underway. Prior to her assignment in San Diego, Greta served as director of the Omaha National Cemetery Complex in Nebraska, where she was also responsible for the Fort McPherson National Cemetery. In an earlier assignment, she was assistant director at Riverside National Cemetery in Riverside, California. She joined the Veterans Benefit Administration in 2010 and graduated from the National Cemetery Administration's year-long Cemetery Director Intern program in 2013. Greta Hamilton is my sister-in-arms, having retired from the U.S. Air Force as a major with 20 years of service. Please welcome to the podium, Director Greta Hamilton.
Thank you, Soleil. On Veterans Day, it is fitting to evoke the memory of one of the most popular and most written about presidents in our nation's history, and the very reason the National Cemetery Administration exists, to care for those who have borne the battle. President Lincoln delivered some of the most poignant and memorable speeches in history. 2 of the greatest speeches ever given were Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, given on the day of the dedication of the Gettysburg National Cemetery, and the other, his second inaugural speech. They are the most often referenced and praised of his many works. Each speech was only a few hundred words. Lincoln could give a master class in composition and delivery. He was brief, but the impact of his words was and is undeniable. To that end, I promise that I will be brief and earnest in my praise to the members of our veteran community. In the time that I have, I wish to not only thank those who wore the uniform and pledged to support and defend this country against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, but also to include spouses, children, mothers, fathers, and those who supported military members during their time of service and after. Even though you did not wear the uniform, there were times when you were called upon to make sacrifices. You endured the frequent moves, long separations, and weathered the loved one's deployment to places that put them squarely in harm's way. One of my most favorite movies of all time is Saving Private Ryan. The story is based on the Nyland brothers. The story is an excellent example of what families during wartime are called upon to bear. In the most dramatic scene, and there are many in this film, not one word is spoken. The actions of the characters in this opening scene speak volumes of family sacrifices. It opens with a blue star flag hung in the window. The flag displays 4 stars, an indication that there are 4 members of the family serving the country. We see, presumably, the mother of the 4 military members washing dishes. You get a sense that she feels something is wrong, even before she notices the car speeding toward the house. She goes outside to meet the visitors, realizing who they are and what they are there for. You can almost sense she is asking, which one of her boys is it? Edward, Preston, Bob, or Fritz? She collapses and we know the news is grave. For any member of the military who puts on the uniform, there is the possibility that the nation may call upon you to make the ultimate sacrifice, to lay down your life in defense of your country. No other profession demands that. I am grateful for your commitment to defend that which we hold dear. To all veterans and your family members, thank you for the sacrifice. This is the National Cemetery's pledge to every veteran interred in our cemeteries that you will never be forgotten. In addition, my staff and I would like to honor the men and women who perished 20 years ago in 3 separate acts of terrorism on September 11, 2001, and also the families and the loved ones of the nearly 3,000 individuals who were killed, and the first responders who answered the call on that fateful day. Lest we forget, as Lawrence Benyon wrote in the poem For the Fallen, at the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Thank you.
We're very fortunate to have San Diego Assistant Fire Chief John Wood join us in commemorating Veterans Day 2021. On September 17, 2001, 6 days after the Twin Towers were destroyed in a terrorist attack, San Diego Deputy Fire Chief John Wood and his fire rescue team arrived in New York City. He'd never been to the city before. His first impression of the World Trade Center was one of utter devastation. On 9/11, Chief Wood had been with the San Diego Fire Department only 5 years. Since then, he's progressed quickly through the ranks. As the Fire Rescue Department's Assistant Fire Chief, he currently oversees all aspects of the Fire Department's business operations, including the Emergency Command and Data Center, employee services, logistics, and community risk reduction. Chief Wood is an FBI certified bomb technician and a member of FEMA's Urban Search and Rescue Program. He served on the fire department's hazmat team. In addition to the Twin Tower attack, Chief Wood has responded to other nationwide disasters, including Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy, floods in Colorado, and the 2014 landslide in Oso, Washington, that blocked a river, swamped many homes, and killed at least 24 people. Chief Wood and his wife, Shelby, an educator, live in San Diego, and they have 2 sons currently attending college. Chief Wood, we appreciate you being here with us to mark this special day in the life of our nation.
Thank you, Soleil. Hello and happy Veterans Day. Over 20 years ago, many of us remember exactly where we were when the horrid events of September 11, 2001 unfolded. For me, I had just finished a busy shift at the firehouse. That morning, I took over childcare duties of our 2 baby boys as my wife, Shelby, headed in to teach her first grade class. While I was resting from the busy night before, Shelby called home and said, Turn on the TV, something horrible is happening in New York City. As I stood there and watched the North Tower burning, my mind went into firefighter mode. I remember thinking, how would San Diego Fire Rescue handle this emergency? Next, I witnessed the South Tower being struck and realized that this country was under attack. Still thinking in the mind of a professional firefighter, I concluded that San Diego Fire Rescue would run into that building to save lives, just as FDNY and NYPD were doing. Then, the South Tower collapsed, and I realized that many firefighters, police officers, and citizens perished without a moment's notice. Then, my home phone rang. It was San Diego Fire's Urban Search and Rescue, California Task Force 8, stating, "Pack your bags, you're going to assist with the search and rescue operation in Manhattan." After the military flew us into McGuire Air Force Base, our task force spent 2 weeks on the pile for the search, rescue, and recovery of victims. Upon arrival, the sights, sounds, and smell of the devastation were overwhelming. It is truly something a person never forgets. We were able to recover many of our fellow humans, bringing closure to families that were devastated from this terrorist event. During our deployment, an extremely large banner hung from a neighboring high-rise, stating in large block letters, "We will never forget." Over 20 years later, I am proud to say that the world has not forgotten. Personally, I will never forget the terrorists that did this despicable act. I will never forget the many faces of grief on the firefighters, police officers, military personnel, New Yorkers, and civilians as a whole. I will never forget the closure that California Task Force 8 brought to grieving families and my teammates on that deployment. I will never forget the kind New Yorker who showed up at One Liberty Plaza with dozens of pizzas when we were hungry. I will never forget a country and largely a world that came together as a unified team. I will never forget the sacrifices that our veterans and their families have made since that fateful day. To all veterans, continue to be safe, focused, and fortunate. On behalf of the San Diego Fire Rescue Department, thank you on this special day.
It's my great pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Christopher Ludmer, a San Diego attorney and principal at the C.L. Ludmer Law Firm. On 9/11, Navy Lieutenant Ludmer, a member of the Judge Advocate General Corps, a JAG officer, was assigned to the Pentagon. We've asked him to give us a first-hand account of his experiences during that tragic day. While on active duty, Lieutenant Commander Ludmer was supervising prosecutor and senior trial counsel for the Navy's Trial Service Office Southeast, and was in charge of all courts-martial from South Carolina to Texas, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. In addition, he was a special assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Georgia. Chris left the Navy in 2005 to join a large law firm here in San Diego, where he honed his trial skills. He eventually decided to establish his own practice, C.L. Ludmer, in order to work more closely with clients and help them avoid litigation when possible. Chris is a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and lives in Poway with his Irish wolfhounds, Declan and Kira. Chris, thank you for joining us to help commemorate Veterans Day 2021.
Thank you, Soleil. The Memorial Gateway at the Pentagon is marked with the date and time, September 11th, 2001, at 9:47 a.m. These words describe its purpose. We claim this ground in remembrance of the events of September 11th, 2001, to honor the 184 people whose lives were lost, their families, and all who sacrifice that we may live in freedom. We will never forget. I will certainly never forget, because I was there on that fateful day. It was a bright, clear Tuesday morning. I was a young Navy lieutenant, the flag aide to the admiral in charge of the Navy's Judge Advocate General's Corps. We were in a meeting in our offices at the Pentagon when, suddenly, someone shouted to turn on the TV. The news was showing images of a plane that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Then, as we watched in horror we saw a second plane hit the South Tower. Then I heard a terrible boom. At the same time, the room seemed to lurch slightly, like being rear-ended in a car while stopped at a light. It felt like the building shifted somehow. I heard shouting and running in the hallways, and then blaring alarms, punctuated by speakers, echoed an order to evacuate. With seeming chaos all around, we got everyone organized. Making sure that we had all our people, we then joined the river of khaki, green, and blue uniforms flowing through the tightly packed halls, down the winding stairwells, and finally, outside. We came out on the side of the Pentagon that faces the Potomac River, the Lincoln Memorial, and beyond, the gleaming white spire of the Washington Monument. As the sun hit my face, a hand on my shoulder turned me around to face the heart of the American military. Choking plumes of black smoke covered the Pentagon, spiraling into the sky in an endless, terrible ascent. Lines of uniformed and civilian men and women continued to pour out the exits, some walking, more running, some bloody, while helicopters hummed overhead, drowning out the blare of sirens. Someone nearby had a radio, and we crowded around trying to listen to anything we could. Calls went out for doctors, nurses, anyone with medical training. A kind of triage camp was being set up for the wounded. There were many. Suddenly, people were running through the crowd shouting that another plane was heading toward us, ETA 2 minutes. Hundreds then ran toward the river where the hill gently sloped, and it was there in that natural trench that they threw themselves for cover. In those moments, there was no rank, no formality, no gender or race, just Americans wearing their country's uniform looking to help each other. At the same time, hearing a loud screech, I looked up to see fighter jets, their wings visibly packed with missiles, circle overhead. The Pentagon was burning. Hundreds were running for cover. Wounded were spread on the ground, and fighters were flying combat air patrol over our nation's capital. A morning that started like any other had turned in the blink of an eye into war. We had to stay where we were for about 12 hours before we could leave the Pentagon grounds. I lived in an apartment in Arlington on Army-Navy Drive, literally across the street from the Pentagon. When I got home, the first thing I did was use my landline to call my family. They had wondered whether I was alive or dead for 12 hours. Then I dropped and sat on the floor in my uniform just watching the news, hour after hour. I didn't eat or sleep. I remember my phone ringing. It was my admiral. He simply said, "We're going in. Report as usual." "Aye, sir," I said. At 6 a.m., I stood up from the floor, still in the same, now wrinkled and stained uniform. I didn't think to shower, or shave, or change. My eyes were red from lack of sleep, and my cheeks were dusty, except for streaks that were washed clean by tears that didn't stop until there just weren't any left to shed. Zombie-like, I walked outside and across the street to do my job. It was still dark. The Pentagon perimeter had been secured, surrounded by armored vehicles and guarded by fully armed Army paratroops. Entering the Pentagon, I took the route I usually did to reach my office. The usually spotless halls were covered in ash, cracking under my footsteps and muffling the normally loud echoes. The air smelled and tasted of metal and burnt everything. Smoke stung my lungs. The building was still burning. I could actually see the orange flames, but I kept going inside. As I walked, I looked through the windows into the inner courtyard. The grass was covered with white body bags. The entire JAG front office staff was at work that morning. We were sending a message. Whoever you are, whatever you do, you cannot stop us. You have failed. After about 2 hours or so, firefighters came into our spaces yelling that the fires were still burning and that, in addition to the smoke hazard, there was concern that this part of the building might also collapse. We stayed until they forced us out. The fact that I was able to walk out of there twice is due to luck and to why we should celebrate Veterans Day. First, the luck. The section where the plane hit had just completed a major renovation, which caused the office where I worked to move to the wedge next to it. But for that renovation, I would have been in our old spaces overlooking the helipad near where the plane went in. And it wasn't just me who was lucky. About 800 people were working in that section or wedge of the Pentagon where the plane hit that morning, far fewer than normal. If the plane had hit any other section of the building that day, there would have been as many as 5,000 people directly in the flight path. In an ironic twist of fate, construction of the Pentagon began 60 years to the day before the plane hit, September 11th, 1941. Experts concluded that two critical design decisions kept the Pentagon standing long enough to let so many escape. Not one Pentagon worker was killed during the partial collapse of the 2nd through 5th floors. Compare that to the fate of thousands trapped inside the World Trade Center who couldn't escape before the towers fell. The work our fellow Americans did 60 years before the September 11th attack gave us information that we now apply to modern-day construction to keep our buildings standing when seriously damaged. Why is that important today? The other sites struck by terrorists on September 11th have been altered completely with a new building and a memorial park. But the Pentagon remains. It remains a symbol of American strength, pride, and service. Most importantly, to me, it's a reminder of just how much we owe to our past. And in the end, isn't that what Veterans Day is all about? So thank you to all of our veterans and to your families. Thank you for your patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the good of all of us. Happy Veterans Day.
Being able to honor our veterans this Veterans Day is a privilege we do not take lightly. We're a nation grateful for their commitment and sacrifice, and one day is just not enough to say thank you. Director Hamilton, Assistant Fire Chief Wood, Lieutenant Commander Ludmer, we thank you for sharing your words of wisdom, gratitude, and remembrance. While we will never forget the loved ones lost in the events of that fateful day, September 11, 2001, reflecting upon a day and era within our history that changed our everyday existence, we will temper it with remembering the brave actions of our first responders, our veterans and their families, the courage and resilience displayed then and the 2 decades to follow. As an act of service for their selfless service, I ask that you take a moment today to honor a veteran in one of many ways, beginning with a simple yet sincere thank you for all that they do. Take a moment to share their stories or donate your time to a local veteran organization, and always remember to say a prayer for them and their loved ones. Winston Churchill once said, "Never was so much owed by so many to so few." These words resonate today and will continue to hold true for generations to come. On behalf of the Miramar National Cemetery Support Foundation, our chairman, and our board of directors, thank you for joining us today. To the men and women in uniform, past, present, and future, God bless you, and thank you.